Hi, everyone. Welcome to this super important episode from our Lessons from the Playroom podcast series. I have with me another incredibly special guest, and we are going to be talking about in the top three most requested topics since the conception of this podcast. And I've been waiting for the person who I feel like would be able to offer something that's very helpful and useful for us when we are talking about suicidal ideation in children, because listeners, we know that's scary and it's super activating and it can be really complex and confusing. So make sure you have something to write with. I'm sure you're going to want to take some notes during this. And I am going to introduce our fabulous guest. So I have with us today, everyone, Heather Fairlee Denbrough. So I've known Heather now for many years. She is one of our certified synergetic play therapy supervisors, but that's not all that Heather does or is. So I want to share a little bit more about what she does out in the world. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She is a registered play therapy supervisor. She's been working in community health for a very long time with children 2 to 13, and you do a lot of supervision and consultation. I know this about you. Specialties include aggression, deep engagement with parents. Thank you for tackling that, Heather. I know that's a scary subject for a lot of
My
play
favorite
therapists.
subject.
You just jump right into it.
Mhm.
A lot also around developmental trauma and attachment issues. You also teach and do lots of webinars and presentations, and thank you for who you are and what you do out in the world for play therapists, Heather. Super appreciative that you are joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Heather, suicidal ideation. So, first of all, that says something about you that you're willing to take on the big topic,
Yes.
and that you are putting a voice out there because it's not a topic that you hear a lot of people even kind of wanting to talk about, or let me rephrase that. We want to talk about it, but we don't see a lot of individuals stepping forward saying, hey, I'll start the conversation, or hey, let me offer some information or guidance. So, thank you for tackling a really challenging subject and for educating us truly.
Thank you. It's really important to me to. I was thinking about it a while ago and I thought, oh, I kind of have an interest in things that are almost considered like the dark side of play therapy, like the dark side of working with children,
Mhm.
because anything that is shadow side or things that we don't want to look at, I'm instantly fascinated to look at them.
Mhm. Well, thank you. Um, gosh, it's almost like where do we start, which is probably how so many people feel on this topic. Like, oh my gosh, where do we even start? So,
Mhm.
Heather, I'm gonna just hand this over to you. I mean, yes, how do we even begin to think about this?
I think that the first piece of it that I always want therapists to know is that even something as big and as activating as young children having that kind of feelings, which they do have, even very young children are capable of feeling suicidal ideation. There is a structure, there are steps and interventions and supports. And if this comes up in your practice, you do not have to do it by yourself.
Mm.
It's really big, and you do not have to try to tackle it alone. There are things from some great research that's been done that we know are effective in helping kids with this. And all you need to do is have that open student learning mind, and you will be able to tackle this too if it does come up.
Perfect. Well, let's make sure that we get into some of that. And before we do, let's even define suicidal ideation. Like,
Sure.
what does it even look like? What is it?
So, suicidal ideation is the feeling, the sense, or the thought that either we want to or need to kill ourselves, or that life would be better for other people if we weren't around,
Mm.
or that we may be in so much pain that we think things like, well, I wish I was never born.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, even you just putting that out as a description actually begins to help it make sense why even someone quite young would be, would have suicidal ideation types of thoughts or feelings.
Mhm.
So even that it helps normalize even that part of it.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just start to go into this a little bit more. So, how do we know if a child might be experiencing this?
So there are a few different things. One of them is that sometimes kids will actually say statements like, I wish I was never born. Life would be better if I wasn't here. They may even say, like, I'm going to kill myself. I want to kill myself. They might make statements about ways that they could hurt themselves, or you might notice them sometimes even doing things that are significantly dangerous. Like sometimes we see kids who do stuff that seems like daredevil stuff, but on a bigger level. It feels bigger than that. Or kids that try to hurt themselves in different ways. Um, in like one of the pieces that I often see is kids who will enact things out in play, right? And this is really important for play therapists to know. Kids will act things out in play that are indicative of suicidal ideation. So things that are like a lot of frequent death play, especially if it's not something that seems to be connected, like there hasn't been a recent death in the family, a pet hasn't passed away. So sometimes kids will play that stuff out because developmentally something's come up for them that makes sense that it's kind of going around in their mind. And then sometimes when we see that kind of play for kids who haven't experienced stuff like that, if the play especially feels very overwhelming, like there's no solution, there's no help, there's no hope. So sometimes you'll see kids doing very intense, like violent or death play. And then if you, as the therapist, kind of try to, like, how are we going to help this kid shift this story a little bit? And the story will not shift.
Mhm.
So if you're coming up against something that for you feels like, wow, it feels like there's nothing I can do here. Um, I also notice that a lot of times when I have kids doing play that indicates suicidal ideation, that I feel that sense of total hypoarousal. So it starts to be difficult kind of to think in words. I can kind of feel myself like my brain is just like dissociate, get away from this, right? So that's another one of the pieces that we see. And sometimes kids will actually do things like act out in play, characters or people killing themselves in ways, like in the past, I've had a child who would put a figure on top of my little table instead of playing on the ground and then just push it off over and over again and say, well, they're dead.
Mhm.
So if you
So,
see kids saying a lot like they've died, they're dead, nobody can help them, they're just dead forever.
so I'm hearing something that I want to check out, um, because we see a lot of death play in play therapy, right? This is a
Yes,
common thing. But
absolutely.
one of the things I haven't heard you say is that, or one of the things I guess that I'm hearing the absence of is like a sadness component, that there's more of like a heightened dysregulation no
Mhm.
solution, no way out,
Yes.
can't problem solve it,
Mhm.
versus like someone died and then the felt sense of it is like, oh my gosh, there's such a loss here, or
Yeah.
this is so sad. Am I picking up on that? Am I hearing
Yes.
that correctly?
Yes, I think that's very accurate. It feels like sometimes almost that there's a void of that kind of emotion, and the real, like, felt sense of the play is this very, like, overwhelming, intense, aggressive hopelessness.
Yeah. Which just makes so much sense, right? If we're going to think about the psychology that must be going on inside of a person in a moment of thinking of ending their life. I mean, that would just make sense, right? Like I don't feel like I have a way out. I don't feel like I have a solution.
Yeah.
I feel trapped. I feel stuck. I feel not important. I feel like nobody cares. So it would make sense that those feelings would also be part of the play that's emerging in
Mhm.
the room too. Yeah,
Yeah, and another
super
piece of it is
helpful.
often that what comes in that I think sort of makes it distinct is that there's often a very pervasive sense of shame that comes along with it. I've been thinking a lot lately about how toxic shame shows up for children. And I've been sort of trying to track, in the children that I work with, what does that look like? What does it sound like? And one of the things that I notice a lot is that kids will choose a self object that is a villain or a really bad person or character. And then terrible things happen to everyone around them, and it's their fault. And then terrible things also happen to them.
Mhm. Yeah. Another super important point for us as play therapists, not to assume that the villain is a bad guy
Yes,
or whatever, right? That because
yes,
the villain might actually be the representation of the child or a
yes,
part, right?
yes,
A part
absolutely.
that the child's identifying with. And so, how do
Mhm.
we hold space for that and not reinforce the message of whatever the behavior is that the villain's doing,
Yep.
if that makes sense.
Well, and I think that more and more children are having sort of an enhanced understanding that villains are complicated. So I had a 9-year-old explain to me a couple months ago exactly what an anti-hero is, and he had the definition. He perfectly understood it, and that is the main character for him in a lot of his plays. That's the self object, is the anti-hero,
Mm.
and that's really important to him.
Yeah.
So I think like kids sometimes have an understanding of concepts like that seem kind of like higher level concepts, that they resonate with them because they see themselves that way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you, Heather. So, yeah, so much. So, all right. So, we just talked a little bit about what we might see and feel in the play. Are there things that we might want to be listening to from the perspective of the parents and caregivers, like what they might be saying or how they might be describing the child outside of session? Are there pieces there
Mm-hmm.
that we would want to hold?
Yes. So one of the things that I hear the most from parents is that kids will directly say to parents, I want to kill myself. And because we have a history, at least in Western culture, of believing that children can't feel things like that, or that children, I mean, we still thought in the 1970s that children could not be traumatized, which is, as we know, bananas.
Mhm.
Um, so we've had this sort of cultural shift into where we're now starting to understand that children have much more intense inner lives than we maybe previously thought. And so helping parents pay attention. So if a kid is saying that, we want them to know, let's not assume immediately that they heard it from the video game. that they heard it from their 15-year-old sister, and they
Mhm.
may have, right? And that's always something to explore. Is there a place that this came from, that the child heard it? And sometimes that's not true. And it's this honest expression.
Yeah. I know, Heather, that I find that parents so quickly just want to like dismiss it as, well, that's just sort of like a temporary feeling. Or, it's just that's just how
Mhm.
they're doing it. Like it's not, they don't really want to. They're just like they're struggling. And so
Mhm.
it's like we'll take it half serious versus like, okay, even if we played it out that they weren't fully wanting to, there's still something going on.
Yes.
So
Um,
either way, we still have to pay
mhm.
attention.
Well, and the thing that is really scary that I think we all need to hold, like clinicians and parents too, is that for most people who attempt suicide, the decision to make the attempt happened less than 15 minutes before the attempt. And I never knew that actually until I took a course on access to lethal means and why it's so important that if there are means that folks could use to kill themselves in the home, to get them as far away as possible and as difficult to access as possible.
Yes.
So, one of the things we do at my agency is if a child is expressing suicidal ideation, is we have home support specialists who are trained to do really specific home safety checks, and they will come in, they'll go through a checklist with the family, and they'll make a list of recommendations. Here are the things that you can do to reduce access to lethal means. It's one of the most important things.
I'm going to make an assumption here. It's things like sharp objects,
Mhm.
knives, guns,
Yep. Medication.
exactly, medication. I would even think alcohol in
Mhm.
there, to
Yep.
some degree. But that, yeah, really looking at how closely kids have access to
Mhm.
those kinds of things.
And this is hard to talk about, but one of the things that I have seen more often in younger children, I think because it's oftentimes easily accessible to them, is that they will use things to wrap around their necks.
I was about to say like ropes and belts. That was my next
Mhm.
thing that I was gonna say. Yeah.
Purse straps. Another really dangerous one that our home support specialists look for are the cords on blinds.
Yeah.
Those are really dangerous for
Yeah.
little ones.
Yeah. So I'm hearing a couple of things here that we pay attention, that we get real curious,
Mhm.
that but in that curiosity we take it seriously, in
Yes,
that curiosity, and that we start to begin to create safety for the child around the child in a very conscious way.
yes.
Yeah. I'm gonna just pause and breathe.
Mhm.
Right? These are big thoughts, Heather.
They are.
They're really
It's a
big
really
thoughts.
big topic to think about. I think one of the reasons why it's so hard for us to fully believe that this happens for children is that it is heartbreaking.
Mhm.
If you're a person that loves children, is in relationship with children, values children, this is heartbreaking.
Yeah. I don't know if you see this one in your supervision, but I've definitely seen this one over the years. There's almost sometimes a sense of, I want to turn a blind eye. Because if I turn a blind eye and something happens, then I don't actually have to be accountable because I missed it.
Well, we couldn't have known.
We couldn't have known, right? But if I pay attention and I do allow some of the clues to get on my radar and then something happens, now the shame and
Mhm.
the guilt as the therapist
Yes.
that I now have to process
Mhm.
feels through the roof.
Yep. And so, one of the reasons that I think it's so important for therapists to get familiar with what this looks like is you do not want to be caught completely off guard.
Mhm.
one of the things that we know is that the rates of suicidal ideation and suicide attempts for children in all age groups were, through the course of the pandemic, shot sky high.
Yes.
An absolutely unbelievable increase in those kind of attempts for all ages of kids.
Yes. Yeah. So let's begin to talk about that framework that you
Mhm,
mentioned. So, okay, we got some clues on our radar. We're
mhm.
seeing some things, we're hearing some things. Now what?
So, a couple different pieces. One of them is that a structured safety plan is always a good idea. There are a few pieces, there's many different forms and templates and whatever for safety plans that are out there. I think that there are a few pieces that are really important, which are that you are helping the parent and the child clearly define what is happening. Kiddo says, I'm going to kill myself, like detailing that carefully. It's important for you to talk about what are the red flags that tell you that a child might be feeling that way. So that can be making comments. It can be what we talked about earlier, that you see it coming into the play. It can be parents noticing things at home about the child's mood suddenly seems to have taken a downturn, or the child just really, some of those symptoms of depression that are common in adults, also common in children. So things like no longer interested in things that they used to maybe have take pleasure from, or withdrawing from other people when that really isn't their way of being usually. So some of that stuff we can be looking for. And then we really want to look at triggers. Are there things that happen that seem to kick a child into that kind of place? Right. So, like, just like we would for adults and older kids, we want to think, like, okay, when do we want to track it a little bit? When does this seem to be happening?
Mhm.
Is there a particular kind of incident or a particular kind of transition or day or stress
Yeah.
that seems to be increasing this for a kid?
Yeah, I would even say time of day too. That's one
Yes.
of the things that I've noticed is that sometimes there's like a cycle in the day, and that there's, I call them hot spots. Hot spots in the
Mm,
day, often when more alone, or they're more isolated, or that those can be,
mhm.
specific times of day.
I have a kid who, the specific time of day that this child often feels that way is right before going to after school care,
Mm,
because they have really intense social issues and struggle with other children to a really intense extent.
mhm.
And so that the feeling of having to do that again when they feel so lacking in skill in that area is really overwhelming. So
Yeah.
absolutely yes, I would say looking at time of day.
Yeah, time of day, circumstances, yeah,
Mhm.
all of those pieces. Okay, I'm gonna ask a question that I guarantee there's a listener that's wondering this right now. When
Sure.
you're doing the safety plan, is it with the kid in the room? What about the age of the kid? How do you bring the kid into this if what
Mhm.
you're just picking up on is like in the play itself?
Yep.
Help us wrap our mind around that a little bit.
Sure. So the way that I think about this is, for most children, I want them to be as involved as they can be in the making of the safety plan. So, what that looks like is, so I've developed a tool that I use, a template kind of that I use for involving children in safety planning in a way that I think is really easy. So, I've done this with kids as young as 3, and they have participated in it, used it the way it was intended to be used. So, I think of it as sort of like a visual stress management chart. And so it has places where you can just plug pictures into it. You can also make your own. It's super easy. I made this one on Canva, which is amazing. I love Canva. Um, but what I put is I choose 6 strategies with the child that they feel, and most of the time I don't even do this in words. I usually do something like things that make your body go from
Yeah, like
this
all tight. Yeah.
to
Yeah, it's more relaxed.
to
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
And that makes sense even to a 3-year-old,
Yeah.
right? They know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
They might not know what it means if I said, "Do you ever feel like killing yourself? Let's find a strategy for that." But they
Okay.
absolutely know what differences in the body feel like.
Okay. That right there, that's brilliant. I think that's what the listeners are going for is you don't actually have to sit down with a 3-year-old and go, let's talk about whether or not you're thinking about killing yourself. That you can,
Well, I will still do that.
okay, you'll still do that.
So I do think that it's important still for all ages of kids to ask the question,
Uh-huh.
not because necessarily the child is always going to know how to answer, but because just like when we're working with older kids and adults who experience suicidal ideation, we want to get across that it is just another thing that can be talked about.
So good, Heather.
Like
So,
Mr. Rogers says, everything that's human is mentionable, and everything that's mentionable is human.
mm,
Like we want people to know this is just a thing that you are welcome to talk about it. It's not off limits.
yeah. So finding a way to bring in the conversation.
Mhm.
And what I'm also hearing is depending on the kid, there's ways of adapting the plan that makes sense
Yes.
for them, whether it's more visual, whether
Mhm.
it's more describing body sensation. Maybe there are
Mhm.
some kids where you can just directly have the conversation,
Yep.
but that it doesn't have to be like it's just this thing, like this one thing
Mhm.
in this one way that we can make it
Yes.
really adaptive.
Yeah, exactly. Like we want it to be adaptive. And I've used this visual stress management piece with children from 3 to 14. And many of the kids then say, "Well, I think you need to do one with my mom too." So they will tell you.
Mhm.
And then, really the way that we do that is that we invite kids to come up with strategies that help their bodies move into that more relaxed ventral vagal state, right? So a lot of times here's a little shout out to the synergetic play therapy nervous system chart, because on the back of that chart, it has this beautiful list of so many strategies for regulation. And what I've done is pull some of those that I think are the ones that will make kind of the most sense to little kids. So crunchy food, hot drink,
Mhm.
cold drink, things like that. A lot of my kids pick sand tray because they have little sand setups at home. I've had kids do snuggles and cuddles with their parent, wrapping themselves up in a blanket. I mean, kids will come up with like really just awesome strategies, and sometimes they might need a little help, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I try to place the decision making about which ones to put on the chart into the hands of the child.
Yeah. So for those of you who are like, where's that chart? If you go to synergeticplaytherapy.com, there's a free resources tab. If you go to the free resources, you can get
Mhm.
that chart along with other free resources as well. So we'll just
And
link.
I highly recommend it. It is probably the one therapeutic resource that I use more than any other one.
Awesome. So great. So we're going to have the conversation.
Mhm.
We're going to be explicit about it.
Yep, we're going to be explicit.
Mhm.
And one of the pieces about that for you as the therapist, right? One of the things that we need to do and why we need to get comfortable talking about this stuff, or at least comfortable with being uncomfortable about talking about it, is that we need to be training parents to also be able to be direct.
Right.
So a lot of folks have this idea that if you ask someone about suicidal ideation, you will put the idea in their head. And this is not true. So if you ask a child who's not experiencing suicidal ideation, do you ever think about killing yourself? They will look at you like you have literally grown another head. They look at you just like,
Why would I do that?
yeah, they just have no concept
Right.
of even what you're talking about.
Mhm.
But if you ask a child who is experiencing that, do you think about killing yourself?
Mhm.
It is so powerful for them to understand, even just that someone else is aware
Mhm.
that that is a possibility.
Yeah.
Because most children think that they're the only I mean, we see this with kids with all different kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
I think I'm the only kid with divorced parents, right? I think I'm the only kid who feels like I want to kill myself.
Mhm.
So we want them to understand that this is just something that people experience,
Mhm.
and parents need to be able to ask those questions,
Mhm.
because then the message that they're sending is, you can talk to me about this thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about it. We're going to create a safety plan.
Mhm.
You talked about this sort of stress reduction piece. What else? What else is part of this framework that we need to
Mhm.
hold?
So, along with, so when we're sort of training parents, I like to do that one on one with the parent. So, this piece of it, I wouldn't do with the kid in the room, the parent training piece. And I let them know, like, just exactly what I just said about, if it's not in your kid's head, they will just look at you like they have no idea what you're talking about. And you will know that it's not an issue. Parents need to be supported to feel brave enough to ask the questions. And the other piece of this, like any of our work with parents really, is that we're also holding for them an enormous grief that comes along with realizing that your child feels that way.
Totally.
They may feel like a failure. They may feel completely overwhelmed, even by the suggestion that their kid feels that way. They might blame themselves. They might start feeling shame about it. That's a very common reaction, is that they feel like they must have done something to make that happen. And oftentimes, for the kids that I see, nobody did anything specific, but many children have experienced enormous traumas of various kinds and feel completely ill equipped to deal with their own emotions and reactions to things,
Yes.
and feel like they can't do it.
So this is so interesting. I don't think I've ever recommended a movie before in this podcast series. Maybe I have. I don't really know. But there is a movie out right now called The Sun. Son. It's
Mhm.
Hugh Jackman's new movie. And it is the movie of this. His son ends up committing suicide. And it's the journey of the everything that you're talking about. I think it's a brilliant movie for
Yeah.
therapists to watch. Even in the movie, the child actually goes to therapy. So even from that perspective, to kind of go, what did that therapist miss? What could have been done differently? Where were the intervention points? Where were the conversations that didn't happen? Right? Where
Yeah.
are the pieces where the parents could have been supported in a slightly different way? Because I love what
Mhm.
you said, to give them the courage to be more direct, about it. So I'm just going to recommend that as a movie
Mhm.
in this conversation. The movie
Ah,
won many awards. It's a beautiful, beautiful hard film, but a very beautiful film.
yeah. That sounds
Yes,
amazing.
yes. So, okay, we are deep in the process with
Mhm.
parents and caregivers in
Mhm.
this one, holding a lot while
Yes.
they move towards this, have the
Mhm.
conversations, et cetera, safety planning with
Yep.
them.
Well, and
educating them.
part of the reason for the safety plan is not just we're making a list of things that could help, but it is the safety plan in times like this is the safe container
Mhm,
for the parent
mhm,
to be able to feel like they know what they're doing.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, we're talking about the kid, we're talking about the caregiver. Let's talk about the therapist for a moment,
Hmm.
okay? Because we need support when this stuff comes up. So
We do.
let's talk about impact on the therapist. Let's talk
Sure.
about what needs to happen there, impact on therapist nervous system, all of that. And then, unless there's another piece in the structure that you were talking about that I've jumped ahead too quickly on.
No, I think that this piece of it loops in with the last piece because the last piece in doing this kind of structure with kids is that you have to be very intentionally caring for your own nervous system while you're doing things like this with children and their families because it is incredibly dysregulating and it can land on you like a ton of bricks.
Mhm.
Sometimes in sessions like this, you you can get done with the session and maybe you sit down to write your note about it and you just
Zone
click
it.
out.
Yeah. Mhm.
And then it's 10 minutes later and you think, what have I been doing? Right? So we have to be really intentional
Mhm.
about how we're caring for ourselves. I have all kinds of little things with me. I have like it's probably looks like the purse of a witchy mom that got dumped out. But I have things like an essential oil on my desk. I have little like textural things to be able to touch to kind of get some tactile input in there. I have ways that if we're sitting on the floor, I have ways that I move my fingers along the carpet to be able to feel the carpet and underneath me and exactly where I am while I'm doing play with kids like that.
Mhm.
And you're going to have to figure out for you, right? What are the exact things that land in your nervous system that bring back that sense of felt safety for you? Because sometimes in sessions like this, it's going to be hard to find.
Totally, 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 totally. So, all right. So, taking care of ourselves with this. All right. I want to talk about worst case scenario.
Mhm.
We do all of this, Heather, and then the child takes their life.
It can happen.
I think that's important to name that we
Mhm.
do the best we can
Yes.
and we hold what we can.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we're not standing next to the kid 24 hours a day.
We're not.
And at the end of the day, the child still may choose.
They might.
They might.
Most of the time, therapists are seeing children one time a week for an hour.
Right.
Or if you're in a place where you can do something different than that, or the child's at a higher level of care,
Yeah.
2 times a week
Yeah.
for an hour each.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time, they're out in the world.
Exactly. So I want to name that. Like, how do we hold that for ourselves and hold our hearts in that?
Mhm.
And then lean on major support systems if
Mhm.
when, because likely we're also going to be put in a position to have to hold even more with the family system, or in some
Mhm.
cases we might be blamed
Yes,
that we
that's
didn't
true.
that we didn't do enough.
So, the thing that I know of that I think is the most helpful and has been very helpful to me, I am lucky enough that I've not had a child complete suicide, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Mhm.
And there's a friend to our agency. His name is Al Vecchione. He has a wonderful center for extremely dysregulated children out on the East Coast. And he started working with us during the pandemic and doing trainings for our staff. And he works with kids who are at the very highest level of dysregulation, where there's really no place else for them to go. And he taught us, all of our staff, he came in and did a training and taught us this absolutely amazing tapping technique that goes through a very certain process on the body. And he pairs it with this really beautiful affirmation, which is incredibly regulating to people just to say it out loud. And the affirmation that he wrote for this is, I'm doing the best I can, and everybody knows it.
Mm.
Doesn't that just land
Yeah.
so softly?
Yeah.
And so what Al does is he pairs this tapping sequence with that affirmation.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've successfully moved other therapists through times of crisis by doing that tapping exercise and that affirmation with them.
Yeah.
It is just I just think of it as like a protection for your nervous system.
Yeah.
To combine those things. So we get that bilateral stimulation
Yeah.
and we get this very soft dose of self-compassion.
Yeah. I was gonna name that if this tapping sequence, if our listeners aren't familiar with what it could be, I think the bilateral piece that you just shared can be a great next, and that we all have access to. So, how do we move in the sand tray? How do we do some more?
Yes.
How do we move our bodies? And
Mm-hmm.
then bringing in a beautiful affirmation like
Mm-hmm.
that. But yeah, how do we help this land?
And I can also provide for listeners who want to dig a little bit more into that. Al has a website called Taming the Tiger, and it is 10 videos of body-based interventions for intensity.
Great.
The tapping ritual is on there, and then there's also 9 other ones. He will take you through the science of it, and then he will take you through the process.
Beautiful. So, listeners, there you go. If you want to go look that up as a resource. So, I'm going to invite everyone to take a breath,
Mm.
even just to have a moment of reminding ourselves that we're doing the best that we can,
And everybody knows
and
it.
everybody knows it. And as we let that land, Heather, where can our listeners access you? Where can they keep learning from you?
So I have a website. My practice is called Playful Integration. And I have a website, playfulintegration.com. All of my offerings are available through there. I have a bunch of recorded, like on demand webinars on the Wonders Counseling School for Mental Health Professionals. That's all linked on my website. A lot of them are about my extreme interest in working very deeply with parents. So things like teaching parents about the nervous system, teaching parents about attachment issues. And then also there you can find through October, I'll be doing a series on relational magic. I want to get a little spooky, get a little witchy for October. So I'm going to be talking about projective stuff in the sand tray with parents. I'm going to be talking about like how are we weaving relationship in play therapy with parents and some other topics too. And you can find all of that there. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and I have a cool newsletter which I always like to promote because everyone really likes it, even though it's rather sporadic. But you can find that there too. It's on Tiny Letter, and it's just me musing about the turning of the seasons and being a play therapist in this very strange world. and often involves pictures of my cat and then my offerings.
So good, Heather. Well, Heather, thank you for again bringing some containment around a complicated and what often feels like an overwhelming and scary topic for our field. So thank you for like we're gonna talk about it. Like we're gonna
Mhm,
talk about the hard stuff, right?
mhm.
We're just gonna talk about it. So thank you for talking about it. And
Like,
listeners, I I imagine you're thinking a lot right now and feeling a lot right now. So keep that reflection going. Find the supports you need. Reach out to
mhm,
Heather if you want more.
mhm.
And as you can tell, she's a phenomenal teacher, presenter. So bring her in for education if you work for an agency. She'd be happy to do
Sure.
that. Totally. And wherever you are in the world, take care of yourself. You are the most important toy in that playroom. Until next time, everyone.